Hi everyone, welcome to the Back to Debate series. We are now going to make a reaction video for our old NSDC videos. I'm Jen. I did NSDC in 2020 and I reached semifinals and got a gold medal.
Hi everyone, I'm Dazzle. I also did NSDC in 2020, and in that I was the champion as well as the best speaker of the tournament.
Hi everyone, I'm Aurel. I did NSDC in 2021 and I was the first best speaker and I reached quarterfinals. So today, as a part of our NSDC or Back to Debate series, we're going to be reacting to our old NSDC speeches.
Yeah, it might be kind of cringe, but hopefully we'll also add a bunch of comments, and hopefully this is useful for any of you doing NSDC prep.
This is definitely not because we regret our speeches back then and want to clarify that that was not what was supposed to happen in the debate. Definitely not, just to flag it out there. Definitely not that.
All right, so I guess we'll start with Aurel's video from 2021. Aurel, I guess, can you try introduce this video, what position you were in, and yeah, what the motion was?
Okay, so this was the quarterfinal round in 2021. I was debating against Riau, and I was in opposition under the motion. This house would disallow pharmaceutical products, for example, medicines, vaccines, tech equipment, etc., to hold patents when distributed to developing countries. And just to preface, I was the third speaker, so you're watching the third speaker speech from the opposition side.
Right, so we'll just start this video.
Mute yourself. I'll likely type you out in minute 5 or 6, but I'll tell you and I'm going to accept it. That being said, pronouns she, her. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. The debate falls into the fiat that Gov team is erasing all patents for not just the vaccine, but all types of medication and tech equipment. This is part of their burden, right? We think it's a nightmare scenario when even base level medicine is going to lose protection of the patent. They killed their own case the moment they told you how when patent doesn't exist, they will allow developed countries and these companies to sell their recipes. If according to prop, in status quo, the issue is that developing countries does not have the funds to be able to buy patent rights towards a vaccine, for example, we think in that line of logic, it falls under the same basis of accessibility, and that how are they going to afford how are they going to afford the base for the recipe, right? Therefore, the logical alternative we get from their side is that they want developing countries to produce their own vaccine. Literally, there's never a problem for that, right? Indonesia could make their own vaccine tomorrow if they want to, but they won't because they can't. Notice in the beginning, it seems like they don't even understand the limitations of patent and to what extent can that be applicable. There's a very late mechanism in the whip when they told you that they will do their own research, and when there's always the question of feasibility that we told you, right? About the whole thing in colonialization. We think that these countries are not forced to buy the medicine, but this is reciprocity because one, Japan and Indonesia has cooperation. It's not because Indonesia is forced or Japan wants to colonialize Indonesia now, but rather there is reciprocity to help each other in mutual relationship. This is how foreign affairs work. This is why foreign aid and G2G partnership exists, right? To what extent do you want to stop receiving any help from developed, alienate themselves from the world? That means that I'm going to address two important questions here, right? First, what is the importance of patent under this context? And secondly, addressing status quo and why this will quickly go south for developing countries if we comply to proposition's proposal, right? But under the first question, within the developing.
All right, so I guess we'll stop it there before we get into your clashes, RL. But I think generally the structure of this is already really good because you had a lot of strong call outs. So I don't know how we're gonna go about this. Do you want to go like one by one? RL, what do you think of
I
the
think
way the speech
I will like
started?
hear from Jen first. What did you think about that, Jen?
Honestly, that was so fast. I was burning 500 brain cells per second to understand that. Which is like, I'm not saying like that's a completely bad thing because like that was packed with like content, but I feel like even though like the ideas themselves are like really, really hammering onto props flaws, I feel like as an intro, that kind of I was like shook, like starting off the debate that way. So yeah, but yeah, wow. Indo-Japan relationships. I'm impressed that you like fit that in this kind of debate.
Okay, so I think I have like a similar take on it. I don't really recall what that debate was like the flow of the debate and the things mentioned at the debate. I was, for one, also very shocked how that got fit in the beginning. So maybe that was in the debate, I don't know. But one of the things I want to notice straight away is the fact that I think in hindsight, and I used to have this problem a lot, which is like the really fast-paced sort of talking that I do a lot of the times. And maybe it's not that obvious here, but I think probably it would be better, especially if a lot of the materials are important and then there are important call outs in the beginning, maybe some wording choices to make it more compact or just better pacing in general, because that is like a lot of things to take in straight away from the get-go. What do you think, Dazzle?
Yeah, so like everyone has said, I think it will make a lot more sense, like obviously in the context of the debate. So I don't know, I'm a fast speaker myself, so I don't have like anything to like go against that. I like the several burden pushes though, and I think that's also something most third speakers should try to attempt to do, which Aurel did quite well here, is to point out key burdens that either like anything that you want to clarify at the start of the speech, it's really good to just put it at the start and separate it from your clashes. So it's really clear where exactly the weakest points of the other side are. So either in terms of the burdens that they have not met or in terms of their context. I think also Aurel mentioned some late mechanization. So that's also like additional strategy points that can be kept in mind as a third speaker. So yeah, generally top notch from a best speaker. All right. All right, we'll just move on and go
We
to
lost
the
this
question.
round, Daz, so maybe.
Well, you win some, you lose some. Okay. Yeah, we'll start with the first question then.
Like, first, what are the importance of patent under this context? And secondly, like addressing status quo and why this will quickly go south for developing countries if we comply to proposition's proposal, right? But under the first question, within the developing nations are the most vulnerable actor in this pandemic, for example, right? They are the hardest hit by the pandemic. Within it is of utmost importance that in that sense to ensure they get the best quality of vaccines, or at the base minimum to have certain protection measures over the pharmaceutical products that they are distributed upon. If you hold patents, you are the only ones who are going to produce the product. This means that these pharmaceutical companies are fully responsible to these countries. That being said, under this particular question, Rial tells us that it is inherently immoral for companies to profit over human protection, and it is unjustified for you to endanger the safetiness of certain medicines or basically risk the quality of it just for the sake of making profit. First of all, we're not exactly sure why patents directly harm this, as there was never sufficient explanation coming from prop in terms of what is patent and how does patent work, and therefore why is this harmful. On the flip side, we did give that in detail. We think that this is precisely better achieved under opposition because we've been very clear on the fact that the existence of patents means a few things, to which they are necessary for several reasons. Firstly, for quality control and safety. If you want to tweak the vaccine or even distribute certain medicine, that is basically quite impossible to do without asking for permission and having a green light from the pharmaceutical company that produces it. This exists because in the context of health, how individuals respond to medicine, the side effects, even after going to like vaccine trials and the test for medicine trials towards the responses, like research period is highly needed, right? This is also important in the risk of malpractice or negative side effects that dangers or hampers the health of a certain individual the moment they use a certain vaccine. Through patent, these pharmaceutical companies have a responsibility and the authority to take accountability over their products, whether that by stopping the distribution of their medicines in the lab or evaluate and fix the issue with the medicine. It gives the companies the unavoidable option to take accountability. We think this is absolutely vital because developing countries need to be able to bounce back should anything of this sort happens, right? We highly doubt the fact that developing nations like Indonesia or Rwanda can make better vaccines for their people in comparison to developed countries with developed pharmaceutical companies in the US and Europe, China and Russia, just by seeing the development of their medical industry through Sinovac and Pfizer, for example. But secondly, we told you that why will companies likely do this anyway and address the whole risk of profit and horrible vaccine or like horrible manipulation by companies. Look, yes, companies and any other companies that are inherently profit-oriented, but the base of their profit is contingent on the quality of their products. Therefore, this is why we told you about why the risk of monopoly and the risk of, for example, the rise of prices spike up will likely happen, because there's multiple companies that produce vaccines in the market competition, for example. There's multiple companies that produce the same type of medication, but with different brands, right? We think that in order to make profit out of their medicine and out of these vaccines, it would have to be bought by other countries, and it would have to be exceeded their other competition, right? In the logic of any market, people look for price and quality, precisely because the biggest market for vaccine, for example, is developing countries, because US has developed their own vaccine and developed countries are the producer and their target market are developing countries. Even if you don't buy that market competition, we told you that UN through WHO has control over medicine and vaccine that goes around the world. When the price is unreasonably high, they have the power to intervene, for example, to actually subpoena them to lower their prices should it spike up to unreasonable, unaffordable levels. I don't understand why they would take this fact, because if they conceded upon this fact, means that they inherently agree how because of that there is enough check and balance and status quo in order to prevent the worst scenario that they explain, which is the overpricing of the market. But thirdly, notice how from start to end they never responded to our intellectual property. They've been like, these companies invest it, right? Instead for researchers, we think this intellectual property rights is necessary and it's a form of appreciation, right? Form of reward for what the researchers has done, for what they have as it could be a protection towards
I think she's breaking.
discoveries and new explorations, especially medicine, is an initiative to contribute more in technology and health advancement to continue working with the process of science, right? Therefore, we think this is why patent is vital in that sense. Before moving on to the second issue, I'll take a POI. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Okay, moving on. Okay, so why is it going?
That is so scary. Whoa.
Oh,
Even with the even with the glitches, I think the point is delivered quite well. The PO I think you do RL is so scary though. Like I would be on the point to be like, damn it, I need to give a POI right now. So yeah, since that's the end of the first class, should we also go like I guess we'll just also go in order of like everyone's thoughts,
Sure.
opinions, highlights. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, also like about the POI thing, yeah. And like it was like because most people I feel only go twice, right? You were going thrice, and when you did that, it was as if you couldn't believe that there was no POI. That was so scary. But anyways, I love the rebuttals. I feel like in NSDC, these are the kinds of rebuttals that you want to make. You don't just stop at accusing where the opponent is wrong, but also explain why you solve their problems on your side of the house, right? Because there were lots of mechanisms that explain like how quality control happens on the upside, how like patents are actually not harmful, but they're beneficial in many different ways. So yeah, like flipping it and then like completely explaining how you get to claim that flip is amazing.
Yeah.
okay.
Aurel, what do you think?
I think, yeah, I think the job of like rebutting and to some extent the flipping was sufficient enough. I think what could have perhaps made it a little bit better was I think in that particular clash, I kind of stopped at responding, oh, here's what they said, here's why it's not true, here's what happens on their side, here's what happened on ours. But I think perhaps it could have made the clash a lot more, has a lot more weight if I did do more weighing, which is not just responding to it and not just perhaps claiming why they aren't true, and even if they are true it'll still be better on our side, but directly weighing both sides would have made that clash a lot more compact, and it would have made it a lot more as a direct attack to the other side, because I do think if you only stop at responses then it could give the other side to just give more responses, and so I think it's really important to do some weighing in there perhaps.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that has been said, and I guess there's also just another general tip for responsive speakers to do a lot of weight. In particular, I think an important point here is that it seems, based on the context of this speech, that op or prop was trying to win on quantity or accessibility of medicines, and op was trying to win on quality. So I guess another thing to note is that when there are two different benefits, you want to weigh between them, and particularly sort of identify what benefit you want to champion as your way of winning the debate. And I think Aurel did the amazing job of like identifying at the start that the path to victory here is to whoever helps developing countries. I think towards the end, it could have just been a bit more explicit, like, okay, why do developing countries need more help in terms of the quality of the medicine as opposed to the accessibility? Maybe something along the lines of like, maybe the medicine is cheap, but if there are so many side effects and it doesn't actually solve the problem, then it's just going to be useless medicine. So that type of weighing where you directly address both sides' benefits is probably something to keep in mind, generally for all third speakers as well. But overall, sharp rebuttals, so many mechanisms. I like that. I like mechs. So yeah, we'll move on to the second clash, I guess.
Going to be a nightmare under their side. They told you how it's important for developing countries to be able to make their own vaccines. We ask why firstly, but notice we don't really know what they want. Do you want developing countries to make their own vaccines, or do you want them to be able to buy certain, or do you want them to be able to buy Sinovacs or buy Pfizer for a cheaper price? Because they've never been clear on that, right? We already told you that the right to do that was never the problem. panel, there's a reason in the case of HIV, we didn't let Rwanda produce the medication by themselves because the feasibility of that is quite unaccounted for in terms of how developed are their pharmaceutical industry to be able to produce better medicine for that than US or Europe that directly links to quality. In that, if according to Prop, these companies are vaccines that kill people, how are developing countries not being able to do the same? We don't understand, right? But secondly, there's a real problem in terms of response and the risk of what developing countries can do if the patent isn't there. This gives them the right to tweak the recipe of Cinemax or other medicines. Heck, they can tweak the recipe of Panadol if they wanted to, right? Why are we talking so much about vaccines? Is because we are charitable towards Prop, because we think that it is the most strategic if they frame this debate and that the access for a vaccine is not enough for these countries, because even before COVID, we think access to basic medication around the world and tech as well as equipment has never been a significant issue anyway, right? This is past the point.
Sorry, speaker, you're lagging.
Concern for
Okay.
quality, even
Okay, wait, we'll see if
audible now.
Wait, okay. Starting my speech again in 3, 2, 1.
That being said, past the point of concern for quality, even if these countries are able to create better vaccines and even better medication, we told you there's an issue with trust and distrust. Even in the pandemic, society has trust towards the vaccines and the government. This is where the patents are important to come in play. We need to ensure that these vaccines are of good quality. In Indonesia and in many other developing countries, even in developed countries, there are anti-vaxxers. There's a distrust of the government, like put a chip in the vaccine, right? They don't trust the side effects. We don't think this sort of distrust. We think that this sort of distrust is going to be incredibly worse under your side, because people who don't fully trust the government will likely hinder themselves from getting vaccinated or even to get like certain medications that their country gives them. We think that even if you're able to create certain better quality products, then you're going to create that you're not going to be able to erase the distrust that you have from society, and that trust is something that is hard to earn, because inherently even your citizens are aware that you are a developing country and that probably your pharmaceutical industry is not going to be as good as other developed countries. Therefore, even an average person is able to calculate that probably US and Europe are able to get better medication than your own country should that be available. That being said, we think that's also able to prove why, for example, if the patent is gone, it's going to be a nightmare scenario for developing countries, as well as explain the importance of patents. Proud to
Thank you, Alput, for that.
wow, and that ends the iconic speech from Aurelia Sherlina. So yeah, final thoughts on, I guess, the second clash, as well as like just the speech as a whole, I guess. Aurel, you should probably start. What do you think?
Clash is the same as the first clash in that where's the weighing? Where's the weighing? I think it's incredibly important for all third speakers, and generally if you are a response speaker, even if you're second in WSCC format, I think even like throwing out a little bit of weighing in a second speech can also be very beneficial, both for content and especially for strategy. But I think especially in the third speech is where it's extremely important to do and to focus a lot on weighing, especially when the debate bottles down to very different paths to victories from both sides, in which probably comparing the benefits and comparing scenarios might not be able to conclude the debate in a very clear way. So yes, weigh, important.
Yes, don't forget to weigh as a way of winning. Okay. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if this video gets at least 50 likes, we'll make a weighing article. But yeah, I think the idea of like trust there was like really, really strategically placed. Because that's an issue that says like, even if quality is somehow won by the proposition side of the house, you can still like not get people to use your vaccines because they don't trust it enough. So yeah, I think that was really, really strategic. I feel like maybe another thing that can be improved as well is like when you said the right to develop in developing countries was like never the problem, and that you were being charitable by following Prop's setting of the debate, talking about vaccines. I feel like you could have like shifted the debate away from like everything that was super, super advantageous for Prop, and actually explain what the likely scenarios were, so that Op could have like a better edge on the debate.
Yeah, I agree with what has been said so far. Probably the other thing is just I found that the mechanization in the second clash was a bit thinner than the first. Not to say that there was no mechanization, because always good mechs. But this is just general advice to everyone. You do want to be careful about when you're making assumptions or sort of like intuitive claims. And I'm not sure what the context of the previous speakers, whether they've already proven this and it was just like being flagged, but things like, the quality will be bad, they can change the recipes. Just be careful whenever you're making an argument, everyone, to sort of point out where the likelihood is or like what exactly certain scenarios will happen. That's just sort of like a general tip for any form of argument making. So you do want to explain the process of that a bit more if you're doing NSDC. All right, so that ends our first video from 2021. Round of applause for Charlena Aurelia. Okay, and
Charlena Aurelia
Charlena Aurelia will play a very interesting. You might find her in this year's NSDC for some reason. She might be there in Jogja for some
Mayhaps,
reason. So
perchance.
mayhaps, perchance, there is a possibility. So yeah, hope y'all can meet her and vibe. Well, Aurel, do you have any as a very special person for 2023's NSDC in particular, and a very special person for NSDC in general? Do you have any sort of last words? But yeah, do you have any messages or like any sort of inspirational things to say for anyone doing NSDC this year or just aiming to improve their debating in general?
I think mostly because like a lot of like technical aspects about debating will be covered in this video series, so make sure you watch all three. I think apart from that is just the fact that NSDC and debating in general is meant to be something fun, and a lot of the times the stress of it can take away from that fun, and it can make you perhaps not enjoy the round as much or not enjoy your speech as much. I think especially because NSDC is moving offline, just please make sure that you enjoy the whole experience, make a lot of friends, just really find your love in debating and stick to that, because if you're going to debate for a long time, you're going to need love for debating, because this is quite a stressful sport, if we may call it a sport. Yeah, that would be about it. Make sure to have fun.